Somewhere in the Ballard neighborhood of Seattle, sometime between 1998 and 2005, a framing crew finished sheathing a two-story Craftsman remodel and stapled a single layer of 15-pound asphalt felt to the plywood. The felt was the cheapest water-resistive barrier on the truck that morning. It cost the contractor roughly $22 per roll. It met the absolute minimum of Seattle Residential Code Section R703.2. On paper, that house passed inspection. 18 years later, the homeowner pulled a single piece of cedar siding off the north wall to chase a small stain in the living room ceiling. What he found behind the cedar was not wood. It was a black, soft, mushroom-smelling sponge that used to be the bottom plate of his exterior wall. The mold remediation invoice came in at $27,400. The structural framing repair came in at $19,000 more. The total cost of choosing the wrong house wrap, 18 years after the choice was made, came to $46,400. The difference in material cost between what that contractor used and the right product for a Seattle wall would have been under $200 on a house that size. This is one of the most expensive material decisions an American homeowner never knows is being made on his behalf. And it is being made wrong in roughly half of the homes built in the Pacific Northwest right now, this week, this morning. The Ballard wall is not unique. It is the standard outcome of a standard decision being made under a standard set of incentives in a city where it rains for 150 days a year and where the contractor who poured concrete on Monday is wrapping walls on Tuesday with whatever was on sale that week at the lumberyard. What you are about to see is one of 73 failures documented in the field guide, linked in the first line of the description below. I will come back to it later. For now, stay with the wall, because the wall is where the entire rain belt of America is quietly rotting. The Pacific Northwest receives between 37 and 70 inches of rain per year, depending on which side of the Cascades a house sits on. Seattle alone averages just under 38 inches. But the rainfall number is not what destroys walls in this region. What destroys walls is the duration, Seattle has roughly 150 days of measurable precipitation every year. That means a wall built in this climate is wet for almost half of its life. Not soaked, not flooded, just damp, continuously, for decades. A wall that is damp for 200 days a year for 30 years has been wet for a cumulative 6,000 days. That is 16 and a half years of continuous moisture exposure compressed into the service life of the building. No other climate in the continental United States punishes the building envelope the way this climate does. There are exactly 4 products on the American market that get installed behind exterior cladding to manage that moisture. Grade D building paper. Synthetic non-woven house wrap, of which Tyvek is the most recognized brand. Integrated sheathing systems with a built-in water-resistive barrier, of which Huber Zip system is the most recognized brand. And fully adhered self-adhered membranes, of which Henry Blueskin VP 100 is the most recognized brand. These 4 products do the same job on paper. On a Seattle wall, in a Seattle winter, over 20 years, they perform so differently that one of them protects a $400,000 home and another one destroys it. The contractors who build your house know the difference. The inspector who signs off on your house does not check. The product that ends up on your wall is almost always the one the contractor had on the truck that morning. That is the entire problem in one sentence. The product on your wall was chosen by inventory, not by climate. Pause for 15 seconds. What you just heard is failure number 19 in the American Homeowner's Field Guide. 73 documented construction failures in American homes. Foundation slab failures from missing vapor barriers. Joist hanger errors that collapse decks. Water-resistive barriers that rot framing in 20 years. Crawl space failures that destroy floor systems from below. Roof flashing that turns walls into mushroom farms. Each failure with the exact product name, the cost in materials at Home Depot or Lowe's or any local lumberyard, the contractor markup the industry charges, and the section of the International Residential Code that was either violated or technically met, but functionally ignored. The field guide is $27. The repair on the failure you just heard about, the Ballard wall, Cost $46,400. The link is the first line in the description. One access. Permanently. Now back to the 4 products and the differences that decide whether your wall survives the next 20 Seattle winters. Let me start with the cheapest option because it is still the most common. Grade D building paper. Sold in rolls of either 60-minute or 30-minute classification. The minute rating refers to a laboratory water holdout test. A piece of the paper is held under a column of water for either 30 or 60 minutes. If it holds the water, it passes. A roll of 60-minute grade D paper costs roughly $22 at a builder supply yard in the Seattle metro. One roll covers about 400 square feet of wall. A typical 2-story Seattle house needs between 8 and 12 rolls. Total material cost on the cheapest legal water-resistive barrier you can use in this city. Under $300. The contractor charges roughly $1,500 to install it, and the inspector signs off because Seattle Residential Code Section R703.2 specifically lists asphalt felt complying with ASTM D226 Type 1 as an acceptable water-resistive barrier. The code is met. The wall is doomed. Here is why. Grade D paper has a perm rating that swings dramatically depending on how wet it gets. Dry, it is approximately 5 perms. Wet, it can rise above 60 perms. That swing is not a flaw, it is the original design intent. The paper is supposed to absorb incidental moisture, hold it briefly, and release it back outward as the wall dries. That works in Phoenix, that works in Denver, that works in any climate where walls actually get a chance to dry between wettings. That does not work in Seattle. One more time. 73 failures. One link. $27. The link is the first line in the description. The Ballard homeowner, whose wall I described at the beginning of this video, would have given everything he owned for this information 18 years before the cedar came off. You have it now. Use it before your siding comes off. Now let me show you exactly why grade D paper rots a Seattle wall. A Seattle wall in November is wet on the outside from rain, wet on the inside from cooking and showering and breathing, and the temperature differential between the inside surface and the outside surface creates a constant low-grade migration of vapor through the wall assembly. The grade D paper sits in the middle of that migration. It absorbs moisture from the rain side. It absorbs moisture from the vapor side. And the wall around it never dries enough for the paper to release what it has absorbed. After about 10 years, the paper begins to break down at the staples and laps. After about 15 years, the bottom 3 feet of every exterior wall in that house has a continuously damp band of paper feeding moisture directly into the bottom plate of the framing. After about 20 years, the bottom plate is gone. DuPont, the manufacturer of Tyvek, ran a comparative test in their own laboratory, documenting exactly this failure mode in 60-minute black paper under prolonged humid conditions. The black paper grew mold. The Tyvek did not. Now I am not telling you to trust DuPont because they sell the alternative. I am telling you that the same conclusion has been reached independently by building scientists at the Building Science Corporation, by the Oak Ridge National Laboratory Wall Hygrothermal Modeling Group, and by hundreds of building envelope consultants in the Pacific Northwest who pull cedar siding off rotted walls for a living. The verdict on grade D paper in Seattle is unanimous. It meets the code. It does not meet the climate. Now let me move to the second product. Synthetic non-woven house wrap. Tyvek Home Wrap is the dominant brand, manufactured by DuPont using a flash-spun polyethylene fiber process. A roll of Tyvek Home Wrap covers 9 feet by 100 feet, or 900 square feet, and costs roughly $170 at Home Depot in Seattle as of this filming. A typical Seattle 2-story needs between 2 and 3 rolls. Total material cost on Tyvek for the same house. Roughly $400 to $500. That is approximately $200 more than grade D paper. For $200 more, you get 4 things that the paper does not give you. First, a perm rating of approximately 56. Stable. The Tyvek does not absorb water. It allows vapor to pass through it from inside the wall outward. But it does not soak up rainwater and hold it against your sheathing the way the paper does. Second, an air barrier rating that meets the requirements of the International Energy Conservation Code at 0.004 cubic feet per minute per square foot at 75 pascals of pressure. That means the Tyvek, when properly taped and sealed, also reduces the air leakage that drives most of the heat loss in an older Seattle home. The energy savings alone over 20 years recovers the entire material cost of the upgrade. Third, a hydrostatic head rating that exceeds 210 centimeters of water column. Translation: the Tyvek will not let bulk water through under the kind of wind-driven rain pressure that hits a Seattle wall during a Pineapple Express. The Grade D paper will leak under a tenth of that pressure. Fourth, a documented service life under proper installation that exceeds the documented service life of 15 pounds, felt by roughly a factor of 3. Now here is what the Tyvek salesman will not tell you. Tyvek has 2 well-documented weaknesses, and both of them apply to Seattle. The first weakness is surfactant sensitivity. Surfactants are chemical compounds that reduce the surface tension of water and allow water to penetrate materials that would otherwise repel it. The natural tannins that leach out of cedar and redwood siding are surfactants. Cedar siding is the dominant cladding material in older Seattle neighborhoods. When cedar siding sits in direct contact with Tyvek home wrap, the tannins leach into the wrap during every rain, and over a period of years they degrade the water repellency of the wrap until water passes through it almost as easily as it passes through nothing at all. There is a famous case from a Stanford engineering professor's home in Northern California where the entire Tyvek layer behind redwood siding had literally disintegrated into white plastic shards at the bottom of the wall after roughly 20 years. The same failure mode, slower but identical, happens in Seattle behind cedar. The second weakness of Tyvek is ultraviolet sensitivity. DuPont's own technical specification limits Tyvek home wrap to 120 days of exposure to direct sunlight before installation of the cladding. On a typical Seattle remodel, where weather delays push siding installation back by weeks at a time, that 120-day window is routinely exceeded. The wrap is degraded before the cedar even goes on. Both of these failures have a single solution: a rain screen gap, a 3/4-inch airspace between the back of the cedar and the face of the Tyvek, created with vertical furring strips. The rain screen gap stops the cedar tannins from contacting the wrap directly, allows wind-driven rain to drain harmlessly down the cavity instead of pressing against the wrap, and shortens the wet time on the wrap by an order of magnitude. Properly installed Tyvek home wrap behind a rain screen with cedar siding in Seattle is a wall assembly that lasts 40 years. Improperly installed Tyvek home wrap in direct contact with cedar siding in Seattle is a wall assembly that fails in 15. The contractor who installs the rain screen charges between $1,000 and $2,000 more for the labor. The contractor who skips it pockets the difference, and the homeowner gets the rotted wall in year 15. Now let me move to the third product, the Huber Zip System. This is a structural sheathing panel with a built-in water-resistive barrier laminated directly to the face of the OSB at the factory. The seams between panels get sealed with a proprietary acrylic adhesive flashing tape called Zip System tape. A 4-foot by 8-foot Zip System panel in 1/2-inch thickness costs roughly $48 at Home Depot in the Seattle area. A roll of Zip System tape costs roughly $35 and seals about 90 linear feet of seams. A typical Seattle 2-story house frames out with roughly 50 panels and needs roughly 4 rolls of tape. Total material cost premium for switching from standard OSB plus separate Tyvek to the Zip System. Roughly $600 over an entire house. The advantages are real. The water-resistive barrier is bonded to the structural sheathing in a controlled factory environment instead of stapled on by a framing crew in the rain. There are no laps, no staples, no holes from the wrap installation. The seams, when properly taped, become a continuous air and water barrier across the entire building envelope. Building science testing has shown the Zip System assembly outperforms a properly installed Tyvek installation on most metrics, and dramatically outperforms a typical Tyvek installation done by a framing crew in a hurry. Here is the catch with Zip System in Seattle. The acrylic tape relies on a clean, dry surface and a firm pressure roll to bond properly. Half of the failures investigated in Pacific Northwest zip system homes trace back to tape installed on a wet panel, or tape installed without the pressure roll, or tape installed below the manufacturer's minimum application temperature of 20 degrees Fahrenheit. A zip system wall installed correctly is the best non-membrane wall assembly you can buy in the United States. A zip system wall installed by a crew that does not understand the tape protocol is worse than a properly installed Tyvek wall, because the failures are concentrated at the seams instead of distributed across the panel. You cannot tell from the outside which one you have. The fourth and final product is the fully adhered membrane. Henry Blueskin VP100 is the dominant residential brand. Grace Vicor and the Carlisle CCW 705 are the commercial equivalents. A Blueskin VP100 roll covers 200 square feet and costs roughly $220 at a commercial building supply in Seattle. A typical two-story house needs roughly 6 to 8 rolls. Total material cost, roughly $1,300 to $1,800. That is between 4 and 6 times the cost of grade D paper and roughly 3 times the cost of Tyvek. What you get for that price is a wall that does not fail. The Blueskin is a peel-and-stick rubberized asphalt membrane bonded to a polyethylene face film. It adheres directly to the sheathing across 100% of the surface area. There are no laps, no staples, no holes, and no seams that depend on tape. It is the same waterproofing technology used on the deck of a parking garage, scaled down for residential walls. A Blueskin wall is functionally immortal in the Seattle climate. The membrane outlasts the cedar siding it sits behind. It outlasts the framing it sits on top of. It outlasts the foundation the framing rests on. The reason 90% of Seattle contractors do not offer Blueskin is not that the material is bad. It is that the material costs 4 times more than grade D paper, and the contractor cannot mark it up at the same percentage without scaring off the homeowner. So the contractor offers the cheapest legal option, mentions Tyvek as an upgrade for those who ask, and never mentions Blueskin at all. The homeowner does not know it exists. The wall fails 20 years later. Now here is the part of the video the construction industry will hate. Of every 10 Seattle homes I would walk through with an infrared camera tomorrow, this is roughly the distribution I would find behind the cladding. About 4 would have grade D paper. About 4 would have Tyvek home wrap, of which roughly 3 would be installed in direct contact with the cedar siding without a rain screen gap. About 1 would have zip system sheathing, of which roughly half would have tape failures at the seams. About 1 in 20 would have a fully adhered membrane like Blueskin. That means in any random Seattle neighborhood built between 1990 and 2015, roughly 70% of the homes are walking toward a 5-figure wall repair within the next decade. The homeowners do not know. The contractors who built the homes are gone, retired, or out of business. The original warranties expired 10 years ago. The inspectors signed off on every single one of these walls because every single one of these walls met the minimum code at the time of construction. Meeting the minimum code in Seattle is not enough. Meeting the minimum code in Seattle is the beginning of the failure. Now let me be clear about what the field guide can and cannot do for you. The field guide cannot tell you which water-resistive barrier is behind your siding without you pulling a piece of siding off and looking. What the field guide can do is tell you exactly how to identify the symptoms of each failure mode from inside your house without touching the siding. Stains in the bottom corners of interior walls that bleed through fresh paint within 6 months. A musty smell in the lowest 12 inches of any exterior wall that does not go away after deep cleaning. Soft spots in the bottom plate that you can feel by pressing the baseboard with a screwdriver handle. Failed paint adhesion on the lower courses of cedar siding. Visible bowing or staining of the bottom course of siding even when the rest of the wall looks fine. Each of these symptoms maps to a specific failure mode of a specific water-resistive barrier. The field guide is the diagnostic key. It tells you which symptom means grade D paper has reached end of life. It tells you which symptom means Tyvek has been compromised by tannins. It tells you which symptom means zip system tape has failed at the seams. It tells you which symptom is structural, which is cosmetic, and which is the early warning of the $46,000 repair invoice. There are 3 more failures I could not fit in this video. Ice dam membrane installed only at the eaves instead of 3 feet up the roof. Crawl space vapor barrier installed dirt side up instead of dirt side down. Bathroom exhaust fans ducted into the attic instead of through the roof. They are in the pinned comment below with the exact contractor markup and the real material cost for each one. Click the comment now. You have two options when you finish this video. Option 1. Close the tab. Forget what you heard. Hope the contractor who built your Seattle home knew about rain screens. Hope the inspector caught it. Hope your cedar siding is hiding Tyvek instead of paper, and that the Tyvek is hiding behind a 3/4-inch gap, and that the gap was vented at the bottom and the top. Hope that all of those things are true. Option 2. Click the first link in the description. Download the field guide. Read Chapter 19 tonight. Walk the bottom 3 feet of every exterior wall in your house tomorrow morning with a screwdriver in your hand. Find the failure before the failure finds your bank account. This channel investigates one construction failure per week. If you own a home in America, you need to be here. Subscribe. The next investigation might be about your house. The information was always public. The contractors made sure you would never find it. Now it is in your hands. What they built, what they hid, what you need to know now. The wall behind your siding does not need to be the next one in this video. The $4 fix exists. The $200 fix exists. They just made sure you would never find them. Until tonight.